Hello, and welcome back, subscribers. Today, I'm going to show you how I took this stiff, flat, and boring line artwork, added some line weight, and how I do some general coloring and rendering. If you like today's video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Check out my link tree below to support the channel. Starting out, I worked on a loose and very messy sketch. I went over and did some adjustments and rearranged things so that I'd have something to work with when I go on to my next layer, which is my line art. Basically, with my line art, I have two steps now. I kind of consider it like how people go from flat color to shading and highlighting, where I do a flat line art and then I use line weight to make my second line art layer. I don't just trace over my sketch because that's usually how things get messy or stiff, so that way I can change anything that I like to be adjusted and leave what I feel is good. After I finish my line art, I get rid of the underlaying sketch, and I start to adjust what I feel needs worked on, such as you'll notice with the hair, any overlapping lines where they connect and meet, I just add a little extra volume and dimension to them. I erase some parts around her chest and her elbow that I feel just don't line up correctly and make sure that she has her own fair proportions and all that good stuff before I move on to my flat colors. Once I start my flat colors, I do each of them on a separate layer. I generally, if I have a color that is like a majority, I used to just do a bucket tool, fill it in, and go from there. However, learn from my mistakes. If you're going to merge your layers, and you have a second line art layer, you're gonna end up tugging and pulling those lines with Editor Stencil Fox squeezing this video in here for visual reference. Duplicating line art, merging it with all your lovely layers, taking a smudge tool, airbrush used to be what I used, and this is the result. You are dragging an underlying line art that is attached to it, so it makes it so much more difficult to get a smooth blending of your shadows with your colors when you have that black outline. Even though your top line is still solid, you're dragging an extra one along with it. And then taking away the details of the hair by using an airbrush, you lose all of that glorious texture because you're just dragging it around and smudging it and smoothing it too much, and you're even blending colors that shouldn't be blending. So here's that old and here's the new for a comparison. Hope this makes sense. Enjoy the rest of the video, which might make your illustration look blurry and muddy. So make sure that your layers are all separated as much as you need and utilize them if your program has the option of multiple layers. Procreate is generous enough that as long as you don't have like a 5,000 by 5,000 pixel image, you're gonna have at least like 10 or 20 or more layers to work with. When I started adding my shading, I went for a cell shaded solid shadow, because I feel like with fabric and other soft textured kind of objects, or even with skin, the shadows seem to be sharper depending upon the environmental lighting. Now, this character isn't in any particular environment, they're just kind of standalone, so there isn't really a particular shadow or light source, so I had a bit more freedom to adding sort of what I would consider the imaginary light source being perhaps in front of her or slightly above her, kind of like in a photo studio when you have one of those big old lamp camera lightings. So I then went into adding detailing, which I consider this part to be sort of like a rendering stage where I add in a large portion of shadows and highlights to the hair. I do a lot more texture for the hair because I wanted to keep the form separated where you can see the back of her hair, the middle, and the front with her pigtails in the front. But I didn't want it to stay flat, where I used to just around the bottom and the edges add my shadows and the highlights directly on top, or the little anime band glow across the middle. I liked the idea of almost like if you were to have threads strung together, you can see the highlights and shadows kind of blend very nicely. And for the longest time, I struggled with hair because I used to break it up into just two sections, the back and the front. And I tried to follow tutorials. I used to do the anime style. I used to try to draw every single thread. I even tried the whole following it like it's ribbons coming from the scalp from one point on the head. Didn't work until now. Once I'm done with this, I make sure that everything is just on that particular layer and merge those three together. Basically my base, color, my shadows, and my highlights. I then go in with a technical pen in the smudge brush category between a size 5 and 10. I then basically pull the shadows, highlights, and base color together, kind of like weaving threads, to make sure that it's not losing any of those lines, but it also kind of brings it together and kind of merges it a bit more cohesive. Once I'm done with that, I then go in and finish up any other details and highlights, where my highlights are a lot softer because I feel like light spreads a lot more than shadows, where you can have sharp highlights, but it also depends on the object, texture, and so forth of what you are having in your environments, like how much light would really be reflected off of your jacket if it was just a cotton jacket. Now, if this was metallic or any others, it would be a different story. And I'll go over that with environmental lighting and particular objects in another tutorial later on. I hope that you liked today's video, and if you want this sticker, check out my Redbubble in the link tree below. Stay possum, subscribblers, and thanks for making it to the end of the video. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye!